Howdy guys, here we go, 2 years, about 30,000 miles. It's my kid's Nissan Leaf, which I drive often because it's cheaper to drive 40 miles a day each way.
Absolutely. So in this video, we're going to give Nathan's 2-year update of Nissan Leaf ownership, talk about the good, the bad, how the battery's doing, what's broken. There's been a few things that are broken, a lot of things that haven't, and kind of go from there. So Nathan, you bought this back in like October of 2020. Why did you buy a Leaf?
Actually at the end of September.
Oh, okay.
And the reason why at the time was your father. Yeah, he convinced me. What happened was we were kind of going on this conversation back and forth, and it was lasting for a while. Like, what's a really good used car to get that's something that, you know, you just don't really have to worry about? And initially I was looking at like a Kia Soul or something like that, and this was for my daughter. And then I started thinking about maintenance costs, and I began to think about, well, she doesn't really need to drive that far from home. And then I started thinking, I can kind of track her, right? Because when she goes to charge point or whatever I have, you know, the thing with, I could actually see where she's charging. And so I started thinking along these lines, and it was $9 grand and change, which is stupid cheap. Now this was about 2 years ago, and I thought, why not? Let's just go for it. And I absolutely have not regretted it. There have been some issues though, but I have not regretted it.
So my dad had this big theory, and it's probably a good theory, that if you're gonna let your 16-year-old drive a car, might as well only have them drive one that'll do like 80 to 100 miles so they can't get too far away from home and get in too much trouble. So that was, I know, one of his reasonings, which is kind of a fun reason, actually.
Your dad was dead on with that one. I hate admitting when he's right too, but he was absolutely right.
So,
and it's really ugly too, which is a good thing, actually.
So the Nissan Leaf, right? There's been a couple generations of it. This is the first generation Nissan Leaf.
Yes.
And this came out, I think, in 2011 for the 2011 model year, but this one has a bigger battery.
That's right. So even though this is the first generation car, this has the second generation battery. This is the first year that they offered the 30 kilowatt hour battery as opposed to the 20, which at the time gave it a range just under 100 miles. And right now with degradation, and it does happen, this car is 6 years old, I'm now at about 80 miles and change on a good day. And everything has to be right in order for this car to get that mileage.
So I've got the EPA breakdown here. 2016 Nissan Leaf, 30 kilowatt hour, officially rated at 107 on the EPA cycle, 112 mpge combined.
Yeah.
But that may have been a little optimistic.
That was way optimistic. There was no way you were going to hit 100 miles, not unless you were in turtle mode. But there are a few things that you have to keep in mind. For the first year, I drove this thing completely wrong. So I drove it in the B mode, which is good because it makes it a little bit sharper off the line and gives a good regeneration, but I never used the eco mode. And the eco mode will immediately give you between 3 and 5 extra miles, but it slows everything down. And it really does. It just slows the acceleration down. It makes this car feel like a slug by comparison. I have to do that when I drive here to work because it's a 40-mile commute, and I really want to make sure I have extra battery in case there's a power outage or in case your dad is, you know, shaving or whatever, and we can't use electricity. I want to make sure that I've got a little bit of juice so I can drive around Boulder and find another place to juice up.
How much facial hair do you think he has? Do you want to pop the charge port? I want to show that.
Yes, so the charge port. So this car does have an interesting thing that a lot of cars don't have, especially back then, and that is it has fast charging capability, which I've used maybe 3 times now in its lifetime that I've had it.
So what these cars have is 2 ports, as Nathan talked about. So you've got your standard port, which is for charging at home off 110 and then a 240 volts.
It's a regular J.
And then over here, you've got this big scary looking one.
Chadmo, baby.
Yeah, so this vehicle does have the fast charging. Now, when you have had to fast charge it, has it been a pretty good experience?
It's been a good experience, but I was warned early on by a lot of experts before all the experts came out of the woodwork. And they said the same thing. Fast charging, especially a car like this, if you overdo it and you fast charge too often, you will severely damage your battery and you'll drop its life. In other words, overdoing it with fast charging, if you do it once a week even, not a great idea. Just every once in a while is okay. On these older batteries, mind you. So I've done it like, I don't know, 3 times. And one time I had to do it, we almost had a power outage and we were like super low power over at our office. So I drove it down. There's a market down the street that has a fast charger. which you have to jump through hoops in order to make this thing work. You have to make a phone call, use a credit card, swing a dead cat over your head and make it all happen. And once I finally got them to agree, plugged in the CHAdeMO, which was really easy to do, and it went from less than 10%, I believe. I was like right, or just under 10%. And in 20 minutes, I was well over 80%. I went and got lunch, and by the time I was done, this thing was completely full. No problem getting home.
It's pretty good.
Yeah, it was pretty good. And so half an hour really is what it takes for from pretty much zero all the way up. But normally it's level 2. And level 2 charging, by the time I get to work, I have between, say, 20 and 30 miles range. And level 2 usually takes about 3 hours for this car to fully charge and get me 40 miles and have that extra cushion.
And we were just looking at a charger, and the charger was delivering 208 volts at 29 amps?
Yeah, 29 and change.
30 amps, so
basically 30.
Right around a 6 kilowatt onboard charger.
That's right.
What do you think of this location of the charge port? Because,
I like it.
Yeah, because a lot of the new EVs are in the back.
It doesn't make any sense to me. This is so much easier. I go to, some of the markets that also have free charging, or in some restaurants that have free charging. I pull right up, pop it in, no problem. And it's in the center. A lot of other people have to go to the side, and sometimes if someone's blocking it, you have to stretch the cord over the car, or you have to back in. Also, I know that this doesn't have a frunk, and because of that, that's why they can have that up front without much of a problem. Let me show you what they do have, because a lot of people don't realize this.
So this car has a front-wheel drive setup.
Exactly, just like a regular front-wheel drive car.
Single electric motor, and
That's
I think
right.
it only makes 107 horsepower, but it makes almost 200 foot-pounds of torque, which is pretty good.
Yeah, like 189 or something like that, if I recall.
187.
187, that's it. And I mean, this is exactly the same type of setup you would have if it was a gas engine, which made engineering much easier. Remember, they had to look at their return on investment when they were building this, because they wanted to make them inexpensive. So by building it this way, instead of a skateboard platform or having hub motors or anything like that, this type of basic, simple setup made a lot of sense. And what they did, which was interesting, is that they have this here. This is pretty heavy. And then the rest of the weight on the battery is underneath the driver passengers. And it creates a bit of a balance. It's not perfect 50-50, but you still have a lot of weight over the front wheels, which in snow actually is a bit of a benefit. So this thing is okay in snow.
Yeah, how's it been? Pretty good?
It got better when I put on new tires.
Okay.
Yeah, so the tires it came with were not great. You can watch some of the older videos and see that they were not great tires. These have been fantastic, and the car has behaved beautifully. It still has some traction issues because it doesn't have all-wheel drive, but what do you expect? But yeah, no frunk up front. But it's a hatchback, so there is some storage in the back, and it's all right.
Another nice thing, Matt, if you want to take a look at this,
Yeah.
is easy access to the 12-volt battery. So if that dies, you don't have to go disassembling the whole front of the car.
And a lot of people don't realize that the 12-volt battery is necessary in a lot of electric vehicles. In fact, most.
I think all of them, yeah.
Yeah, you have to run basic things on them.
It runs everything for the most part except for the propulsion system and usually the AC. And another thing I love about these Leafs, I thought this was a really smart idea, and then manufacturers went away from it, and there's only a couple that still do it, is they give you this indicator right on the dash so you know exactly when it's charging, how full it is.
And it works really well. It's funny because this car, I really grew to like it a lot more, even though I hate the way it looks. And the reason it looks this way is all for aerodynamics. These headlights, the way they're designed, I actually talked to the designer himself. And this cut up here, and this entire reason this shape is the way it is specifically for aerodynamics and stability.
You lost your hubcaps though.
Yes, all the hubcaps are gone because my daughter used this as a bumper car. Great first car because no gas to leak for explosion. But more importantly, every single one of these wheels has a dent or a major chip somewhere. And once she got to the second hubcap, I'm just like, screw it, I just took them all off. Why bother? They're all destroyed. And, it's fine. So it doesn't look great. I'm fine with that.
So what reliability issues have you had?
There really was one main reliability issue. So shortly after I bought it, I decided not to get it with the warranty because it's like, well, there's so little that could go wrong with it. The one thing I really should have thought about is the air conditioning system, which is very unique in these cars. People they think like, oh, air conditioning, it's just like what's in the house. You plug into the wall, it's the same thing. Well, kind of. But in this case, the way it's set up, it's really tied into the entire vehicle. So it's not just a simple ventilation system. As such, just to replace it was nearly half the value of the car, I kid you not. And it's like, all right, well, the fan still blows. We live in Colorado, and so you can lower the windows and usually not bake to death. I'll deal with it some other time or I won't deal with it at all. And so I opted for choice number 2. And I really haven't regretted it. The heater works quite well, and it has heated seats. And those heated seats and the heater together, it still does draw a little bit of power, but if I'm very careful with it, it only draws about 5% of the power on a really cold day. I think, though, something that you guys may not know is that Tommy really hasn't had a chance to drive one of these, and I think it'd be a great idea if you did do that.
Woo!
So,
Lucy, if you're watching, I'll take good care of your baby.
Now, you don't need a key to start the car. However, because my key is sort of not used very often, you sometimes have to hold it near the starting thing or else it won't let you start it up. I know it's crazy, right? So let's give it a shot, though. I think you'll enjoy it. I'm going to put it have you put it in B mode, which will give it a little bit more brio.
So Nathan, there's a lot going on the interior.
Yeah, there is a lot, and actually you get used to this pretty quickly. It's a real logical layout. Over there on the far left, that's showing your efficiency, and what you're trying to do is build a tree. I kid you not, little trees grow when you drive right.
Okay.
And everything else is pretty obvious up top. Down here, though, that's showing your battery life and your overall battery life and your range. And then in the center, it tells you, at least with this display, how long it takes to charge depending on where you go. So 240 volt all the way down to 120.
Oh, I love that. So
it's so simple.
That's a really good idea. So if you're at 120 volts from our state of charge right now, if we were to plug it in, it would be full in 7 hours.
Yep, pretty much. Now, I only charge this thing with 110. Oh, by the way,
can you explain that?
Yeah, because it's cheaper. It's easier, and at my house right now, I don't have a setup for 120. I do, in theory, I could plug it into the washing.
For 240?
Right, 240. But the thing is that I really don't need it right now. I get home, I plug it in by the next day. Even if it's practically empty, I'm pretty much ready to go.
And that's the great thing about having kind of a small battery.
Exactly.
Short charge times, even on 120.
Right now you're in D mode. If you pull back down into drive again, you'll be in B mode. Right.
Ooh.
So that makes the regenerative braking more aggressive, and it makes this thing kind of leap off the line a little bit quicker. And you might be surprised, for the first 50 feet, this thing flies.
So,
then it dies.
Oh, look, I'm building a tree.
Yep, you're building. I told you.
Literally build a tree.
You build a tree.
All right, so we're going to go right on this main road here, and
and don't be afraid to get into it.
Give it a squirt. Sorry, Nathan's daughter, if you're watching.
Fire it up.
Oh, it's pretty good.
Yeah, she's got a little bit of a brio. As I said, and then after just a little distance, then you're pretty much done accelerating, and it's just kind of nice and slow. And it's pretty much on par to what a regular small-engined hatchback would do.
And then in B mode, when I let off the accelerator...
Right, then you're going to feel much more aggressive. Now, there's no one-foot driving per se, but this type of driving in traffic really is one of the best ways to recoup power. Now, if you hit the eco mode, then you drop mileage or gain mileage depending on if it's on or off.
Oh, it was on.
Yeah, so to say even faster with the eco off.
So that's going to change. That's interesting. Now, we need to talk about the biggest kind of elephant in the room with Nissan Leaf. So these used an air-cooled battery setup.
That's the biggest issue.
And that's kind of what killed this car's reputation for battery longevity, is they weren't liquid cooled, which means they are very volatile to temperature.
Exactly.
Now, can you explain how this works? So, Matt, if you want to zoom in here, so we've got these big bars which show us our current state of charge, and then we've got these little clicks to the right. What do those little clicks mean?
Pardon me, those little clicks indicate how the battery life is over time, how long it will last. So in other words, if it drops down to nothing, then this battery cannot hold a charge anymore.
Basically, it's like battery health. So
it's overall battery health.
It starts with 12 clicks.
That's right.
12 little bars, and then I think the warranty kicks in right around 8 bars.
That's about where it kicks in, and the warranty itself is 8 years, 100,000 miles, but there's all these caveats. So for one thing, doesn't necessarily mean they'll replace the battery if you drop below that. What it might mean is that they'll just try to recalibrate the software, which they tried with me before, and it did actually bump up the thing one notch, which was surprising to me, because when I got it, it was at like 11, or a 10, sorry, and then it bumped up to 11. Go figure. Now, over time, you expect these batteries to degrade because the air-cooled setup in these is just not as robust. It does not work as well as the more modern batteries out there.
And they also give you a temperature gauge on the batteries.
Yeah, which you need.
So it's really interesting. Yeah, have you ever seen the temperature gauge go up?
Yep,
like
and down.
Red?
Yep,
and down.
Yep. So this vehicle is affected both by heat and cold. And we live in Colorado, so there are some really cold days and there's some pretty hot days. So what I've noticed is that on a day like today, which is relatively moderate, I think we're about mid-60s, 70 degrees or so,
Yep.
Best days for this car to run. It's best for range. It'll suck up the most amount of energy and hold on to it. So this car, when it's done being fueled or juiced up, will probably have about 80 miles plus range. but on a super hot day, it'll probably drop to like the low 70s. On a super cold day, fully charged, this thing will drop to the 60s.
Wow.
And there were a couple days where I drove here on a super cold day, snowy day, and I had to get off the road, off the highway, and drive the back roads because I knew I'd get further range. And that was how I got here. And I had like a couple miles left.
So it's very affected by cold temperatures.
Very affected by it. And yes, all electric cars are, but in this case, it's even more severe. So that is one of the big factors about this vehicle. But if you live in California or Florida or southern states, places that are sort of like consistent, heat, yeah, will bother it, but cold isn't really there by comparison, and much easier on this car.
So I turned eco mode off. Oh yeah.
Yeah, you feel
Wow,
that?
eco mode is a big difference on acceleration.
It is, and also it cuts a little bit of power from the fan. It just changes the overall feel of the vehicle altogether. So if you run it on B and in eco mode, you're basically getting the best mileage out of this vehicle for short and long distance.
But if you turn eco mode off,
then you actually
it's
have
pretty fun.
Yeah, you can squirt this thing around a corner. It's really funny because my daughter, when she was in high school, a lot of the boys, as I'm sure you know, and I hate to put it just boys, but a lot of them did. They had Subaru WRXs, right?
Yeah.
I mean, a lot of them did. They'd slam them and whatever, because of course that makes it faster. Well, anyway, at lights, these guys didn't quite understand that they'd have to rev their engine, get their pistons moving in order to really go. And at a light, she'd just fire away, and they would just be humiliated for the first X amount of feet, probably to the next light. And she started getting used to that, and I caught her doing it once. What can I say? I just was so happy, and at the same time I was angry at her. I was like, don't ever do that again when I'm watching. It's really funny to humiliate those guys. But yeah, these things they move, they zip, and it also handles pretty good. And on the highway, this has a better ride, I think, than the Fiat 500e and other vehicles of its time.
and steering's easy.
Yeah,
it's a
easy
good car.
enough.
It's a really nice to drive.
It's just a conveyance. It's just a simple conveyance that does the job.
Well, let us know what you guys think. Nathan, thank you for bringing by your Leaf today. This was a ton of fun.
Yeah, well, I'm going to be bringing it by more often because mine's a new car and I don't want to put miles on it.
Thank you for letting me drive it. And as always, it's been Tommy and Nathan.
See you next time.